About it, it's been one of those weeks, a lot going on, and two guys who are so kind to come in and offer their thoughts on any number of things related to American politics. He was the senior correspondent at ABC News, longtime White House correspondent. How about it for Jim Avila, everybody? Hey, Jim Avila.
Good morning.
And a guy who's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. You can find him on TYT, among other places. He is Michael Shure. Michael Shure, nice to see you, sir. Hey, I wonder if you could just we can get to kind of the Chris Christie throwing the heat on Trump in a moment. I'm curious how you're seeing the Hunter Biden thing get digested in the world of politics this week. We'll start with you, Michael Shure, please. Can you give us a sense of how you see that reverberating?
I think what certainly what Republicans are good at in this day and age is throwing something out there and seeing if it sticks. Well, there wasn't when the plea deal was announced. It made great hay among Republicans and the people that they follow, but it didn't really spread. People did not think that this was the kind of deal that was going to take down the White House, which is what Republicans were hoping for, that was going to be an indictment in some way of the Attorney General Merrick Garland. In fact, Garland had nothing to do with it, so he says, and the Trump-appointed special counselor did, or FBI employee did, and so they went with that. And I think by going with that and continuing with that, there was really no way for Republicans to do very much about changing the mindset about Hunter Biden. Even yesterday, Hunter Biden showed up at the White House for the state dinner with Prime Minister Modi of India, and people on the Republican side were complaining that how can he have this, admitted felon and tax cheat at his house? It's his son. So it didn't work out well. It's a story that I think is going to go away. That part of it, the Hunter Biden part of discussions and oversight, is not going to go away.
Jim?
Yeah, I think the Republicans did themselves a disservice. They've built up this Hunter Biden expectations for years now that he was this terrible person, which he probably is, not a great person. At least he had some problems, and hopefully he's recovered from that. But they built it up so much that when it came out, and every line, every story started with a Trump appointee in talking about the prosecutor involved. So there was no way they could charge that this was bias, or that he was. Well, they did claim that he was treated differently, but the facts show that for those charges, he was not treated differently. That most people who cheat on their taxes don't go to jail, especially if they pay the taxes back, which Hunter Biden did. And most tax cheats don't get charged at all. I mean, all those corporate people who don't pay their taxes, they're not charged. So that was not an issue, a big issue among the public about a guy cheating on his taxes. And it doesn't really change the way the general public looks at Hunter Biden, which is that as a troubled soul. He's a person who's got a problem, but he's not an elected official. His father is the president, and his father is doing what, Michael and I are fathers. They're doing what any father would do. You stand by your son. You condemn the act, not the person. And I think that's what Joe Biden was doing. And I think that shields him from the issues involved. Now the Republicans have brought up this new guy, this IRS agent, has been in the news these last couple of days, who has told the committee there, the oversight committee, that Hunter Biden was not given equal treatment in this investigation, and that there was interference from up above. Now, there is no evidence of that. It's just this guy who has come up and said that. He claims that Durham was getting information was getting instruction from the Department of Justice and from the Biden White House, but he provides no evidence of that. So I think that'll go away as well. We'll see.
And counter to or along with what Jim is saying, and counter to what Republicans are saying, Andrew Weissman, who worked at at the Justice Department, where he was a U.S. attorney, a deputy U.S. attorney, came out and said that Hunter Biden got actually more harsh treatment than the average American would have gotten for what these infractions were on taxes and on the gun charge, which never ever gets brought up on charges, and that's something that he settled on as well.
Yeah, and we ought to just mention what the gun charge is, because he was had admitted using drugs, and he lied on a form in the gun form. It says, "Are you a drug user?" And he said no. So he lied on the form. He didn't go out and use a gun in some kind of crime, or have a gun in his possession that was stolen by somebody who used it in a crime. That really is. All these Republicans who claim that the Trump indictments are over a paperwork issue. Certainly, this really was a paperwork issue.
Yeah, this is sort of on the level of a seatbelt infraction when they pulled you over for something more serious. But when you say on gun charges, it does, Jim. You make a key distinction, because it does sort of connote that there was some sort of, what was he involved in, a holdup, or what was was there a shootout, or et cetera?
And when they bring people up on that charge, by the way, I know we have other places to go. That's there as a protection so that they can bring people up on racist and white supremacist and nationalist charges. They look for other things to bring them in on, because being a racist is a vague thing to nail someone for.
I see. That's interesting. I was, Kim had in her news the fact that the fake electors for the first time are a few of them are being deposed, and they are making deals for limited immunity in some of these cases. It strikes me as, I was saying this last hour, as significant, because I've always felt, why aren't we hearing more about the fake electors? I mean, that's a huge brew that was being cooked up to really overturn the election. I understand that the violent rioters, I mean, that's if you'll pardon the use of this word, sexy story, in the sense that it was, there was blood and there was screaming and there were people who lost their lives as a result. But the fake electors were also part of this scheme. Finally, we're getting to this. I wonder if you could just give me your sense of where you think those investigations might ultimately end up, and how they'll be, again, digested in the body politic. Jim?
Well, I think it's bad news for Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman, the people who cooked up the scheme. They may charge some of these fake electors, but I kind of think those are witnesses rather than targets, and that they'll be used to go after the people who were in that in the hotel room across the street from the White House, plotting what to do to try to overturn the election, using false electors, and trying to get Mike Pence to invalidate the true electors. So I think that's going to be where those investigations go. They may land up threatening these people with charges, or charging them if they don't cooperate. But I see them more as witnesses than as targets.
And I've maintained from the beginning that while the order of things has been that Alvin Bragg did his work in New York, and Florida has happened now with the documents, that the biggest case here, in my estimation, is going to be Donald Trump on January 6th. And I think that's the one where he's got to be shaking the most. I also think Florida and Fulton County is big, and it will come sooner than January 6th, I would guess. But these are the little pieces that we get now, these kind of nuggets that come out, where we see where it is headed on the January 6th stuff. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Donald Trump. And it's why I think you see so many people getting into this presidential race as well.
The reality, guys, is that Donald Trump is never going to do time, or it seems, even when pressed, that Democrats, I'm talking about Biden, I think, would you pardon Donald Trump? It seems as though the institution of justice doesn't really have in it the allowance for a president so lawless. You could even argue seditionist, trying to, overturn this election through every means, doesn't have in it the kind of rigorous curb your dog mentality that would bring a real conviction without a pardon to a president. The more I hear, and I'm just curious, I mean, that's kind of a broad description of what I'm hearing from Democrats and Republicans. You look for little hints. It's that nobody really wants to see this guy actually. He certainly won't do time, Jim Avila. You would agree with that. I mean, regardless. And B, I don't know that convictions will really. I'll put it this way: there won't be trials. There might be some kind of a plea deal reached. What do you think of that? I know I've said a lot, but go ahead.
Well, look, I think that the American public is reluctant to put an ex-president in jail, in prison, I think overall. But if the charges keep coming, especially on the charges we have so far, on the classified documents, I mean, he could have given those back and not have this problem at all. So what needs to be done is some kind of precedent set, some kind of hand slapping, making sure that he can't run for president. I think that's the number one priority of most Americans, is this man cannot run for president, cannot be president. If there's some kind of plea deal, that's got to be included. Do I think that? I think the January 6th stuff, if it comes out that they have good, solid evidence that Donald Trump tried to overturn the election by force, I think that that's possible that he'll go to prison for that. So I think we still have to wait on that charge. I don't think he'll go to prison on the New York stuff, and I don't think he'll go to prison on even on the Georgia stuff. I think he'll get some kind of plea deal or probation. It is quote unquote a first offense for him on these. So, and it's a white collar crime. And the history of America is that white collar criminals who have a lot of money don't go to jail. So I don't think the only one that I think he's in jeopardy going to jail is January 6th.
Yeah, and also white collar crime, insurrection to violence isn't a typical white collar crime. You also have to realize that it's not black and white. It's not jail or pardon. Like he could be someone who struck a deal who is never pardoned, and part of the deal is that he would never be pardoned. I mean, there are all sorts of ways that they could get to what a deal would look like. And then you have to realize the people making these decisions are politicians, and they don't, first of all, they're Democrats who wouldn't mind Donald Trump winning the nomination for the Republicans and running again because they think he's eminently beatable. There are also Democrats who don't want to deal with the back and forth over having jailed a president and having that take them down politically. If in fact that's the way it goes. So there are a lot of calculations to come in. I think there is an example in what Gerald Ford did by pardoning Richard Nixon at a time where our attention wasn't 24/7, but it was as 24/7 as it had ever been with Watergate. There wasn't social media. There wasn't the opinions of the people and the anonymous people being shared constantly. The only anonymous person at that time was Deep Throat, and we didn't find out about for decades later. So I do think that there's the political calculations are unavoidable and smart. Ford lost. It was a profile in courage, according to the Kennedy Center in Massachusetts, that gave him a profile in courage award because he lost knowing that by pardoning Nixon, he probably would lose. And that you don't see politicians do that anymore.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, that's I saw in the chat something about Teixeira, about Jack Teixeira. He was the guy who leaked that stuff sort of into the, there it is from Wes. Why does no one compare Trump's handling of documents with Jack Teixeira handling of documents?
Well, there's a big difference.
Yeah, go ahead.
The big difference is that so far, there's no evidence that Donald Trump was distributing these documents to others. We have the waiving of the document, but even then, and he says that I can't show this to you. So that's the big difference. Teixeira was, in fact, distributing them on a website where everybody could see them, especially his friends who were the gambling friends, the gaming friends. So I think that's the big difference. Now, we could see evidence still. We don't know yet. If it's proven that Donald Trump was distributing them in some way, showing them off, or selling them or using them for blackmail, whatever, but there's no evidence that he's done that yet in the indictment, which is a pretty thorough indictment. So that's the big reason.
It's also, I think it's hard to find that trail of breadcrumbs from those documents to sharing them. I mean, that tape where you actually hear him saying, I've got in my hand, classified document or whatever, and it may or may not have been something that was classified. I said that at the time. I said, everybody's assuming this is a classified document with that actually pertained to what he said it was. But I mean, it could just as easily, if it's Trump, have been, just the menu at Mar-a-Lago, and he's just talking about it.
That's true.
But your point is a good one, and I just think it's very hard to find that trail. For example, to the Saudis or to some Middle Eastern power or to the Russians or whomever. So you look at the deals after the fact, and that's why many are drawing that linkage, Michael, between the deal that Kushner made, the new deal that has now come out with the Omanis and the Saudis, between Trump and those parties, that would suggest, boy, this is an extraordinary deal that was made after your presidency, and I'm wondering what other stuff changed hands, is what you're often hearing.
Yeah, and there will always be that suspicion, even if none of it's ever proven, and we don't know everything yet, but it's more about the risk that it posed having those documents there and the types of people that he deals with than actually a smoking gun about who he shared them with. And it was bad enough for these prosecutors that he had them, that he wouldn't give them back, and that they were left unprotected. So again, there's a chance that these people could have been making deals with the Omanis regardless of where those documents were. I don't think they're going to be able to point a finger necessarily to that, but there's a lot we still don't know.
Mackay says, you think January 6th was bad. If Trump is ordered to prison, all hell will break loose. I don't know about that, but Mackay, I'm wondering, I thought, you always heard that, once they indict him in New York, all hell's going to break loose. Once they indict him in Florida, that's his state, all hell's going to break loose. I think I don't know. I mean,
there's a big
thoughts?
jump. There's a big jump, Mark, from indicting and putting a former president who has all of these adherents around the country and frankly around the world in jail. So I don't think we can just dismiss what Mackay is saying. I think that it will be a long time before Donald Trump goes to jail anyway. And at that point, his relevance may be a little more muted than it is now.
I see. Yeah. And it's true. We've just spent time talking about all the reasons that he probably wouldn't go to jail necessarily, although Avila pointed out a reasonable scenario by which he would. Before we leave today, I wanted to touch on Modi visiting Biden. It's a big thing, a state dinner for Modi, who was a prime minister of India. And India, this immense country, complex, but one of the key aspects, and it's been really, it hasn't been buried by the press, by the way. They've been pretty good about referencing the fact that there are real issues with the treatment of Muslims in India. And under Modi, he's brutal to political rivals, and brutal, I'm talking about murderous to the Muslim community, is what is repeatedly cited. I wonder, especially you, Jim, you cover the White House for so long, so many troubled leaders, meaning troubled by these kinds of controversies, pass through those doors. How is that handled by White House staff, by an administration? What kind of balancing act has to be done? And speak, please specifically about Modi.
Well, it goes back to, the most familiar to me is Henry Kissinger. It's real politics. It's dealing with the world, the hand that you have been given. Most of the world, or much of the world, Saudi Arabia is the biggest example of this, where their human rights record and killing of a journalist and killing of their own people, mass beheadings and things like that. It is not, but do we have to deal with them? We do deal with them. We're dealing with India. The issue in India between Hindus and Muslims is a deep-seated hatred that's been going on for years and years. It divided the country. That's why there's a Pakistan. All the Muslims were sent to Pakistan, and they control that country. The ones who remain in India have a real problem because there is a deep-seated hatred there. So as far as how does the Biden administration handle it, look, you can't ignore. India is a balancing factor for China. India has nuclear weapons. They're huge. They have more population now than China does. They are a democracy. So those are the reasons why we have to deal with them. And while I'm sure, and Biden says that he did call him out or did talk about human rights in their discussions, you can't just, it's difficult to turn your back on them. If you want to be an absolutist, then you do. But then you have to be absolute about every other country that we deal with.
Yeah, and that you can't pick the leaders of other nations, as Donald Rumsfeld. So you can't pick your own army and the leaders of other nations. You have to deal with the people that are brought to you. You know, Modi hasn't had a press conference in India in 9 years. And so he's not asked about this very often. And he had this press conference of what they call it a bilat, two leaders in the White House, and he got a couple of questions about human rights. One question I think from the Wall Street Journal about human rights, but they're not hammering him on that, and they're trying to, you know, I think that a lot of the motivation here with Modi is to make sure that they don't become like a second China, and I think that's where the outlook from this White House is on the Modi visit, much more so to the chagrin of many than it is on human rights. But bringing those up at certain times is still important for a president.
Guys, so grateful that you give us some time on Fridays. Thank you. You can follow Jim's got a weekly column now in Barrett Media. You can follow his Twitter feed, and he usually posts it there.
And if you don't, you follow mine, and I post Jim's.
Oh, yeah. We all repost Jim's. It's really good insights into politics and media, you know, which is, so that involves messaging and, you know, what's out there. The zeitgeist, I think, sadly, honestly, because media is sort of broken, is determined by a lot of media messaging. So it's right for this moment in our history, Jim's column. So, and give us it's ABC. What is your
Jim Avila ABC.
Jim Avila ABC. And Michael Shure, you can find him on TYT. You can also find him here often. Love you guys and appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Jim Avila and Michael Shure. Yeah. Right on. Right on. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.